the world of Virell and the guardian of the forest. The planet of Virell was a world of untamed beauty and relentless power, where towering trees with iridescent leaves stretched toward the sky, their roots entwining like the veins of a living being. The air shimmered with the scent of blooming flora, and the ground beneath one's feet pulsed with a quiet energy, as if the land itself breathed. Rivers of liquid silver wove through the dense undergrowth, their currents humming with an ancient rhythm, while the sky above was a shifting canvas of deep blues and golds, illuminated by twin suns that cast long, flickering shadows across the land. Virell was not a world that welcomed outsiders, nor one that could be easily tamed. It was a place of harmony and chaos, where nature reigned supreme, and every living thing was bound to the will of the land. At the heart of this untamed world was Elenara, a woman of quiet strength and unyielding resolve. She had lived on Virell for as long as she could remember, raised by the land itself, taught by the whispering trees and the murmuring rivers. To the people of the planet, she was a guardian, a protector of the ancient balance that had existed for millennia. She moved with the forest, understanding its language, its moods, its needs. She could sense when the land was in distress, when the winds carried warnings of an approaching storm, or when the roots of the trees trembled in anticipation of something unseen. She was not merely a woman who lived on Virell. She was a part of it. Yet, for all her connection to the land, Elenara was not without conflict. The planet had always been a place of mystery, its people living in harmony with the land, but now something had changed. Strange machines had appeared on the horizon, their metal forms cold and unyielding, their presence an intrusion upon the sacred balance of Virell. The humans had come, driven by the need to understand, to claim, to conquer. They spoke of progress, of knowledge, of the future. But to Elenara they were a threat to everything she had ever known. The land did not welcome them, and she would not allow it to be bent to their will. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the forest, Elenara stood at the edge of the trees, her gaze fixed on the distant hills where the machines had first appeared. The time of quiet had passed. The battle between man and nature had begun, and she would not stand idly by. The guardian's burden, Elenara, had not always been the guardian of Virell. She had been born beneath the boughs of the ancient trees, cradled by the roots that had seen the rise and fall of countless generations. Her earliest memories were not of human voices or the clang of metal, but of the whispering wind and the hush of the forest. Her grandmother, a woman of deep wisdom and an even deeper connection to the land, had raised her with stories of the old ways, of the balance that had kept Virell whole for centuries. She had taught Elenara how to listen to the trees, how to feel the pulse of the rivers, how to move with the land instead of against it. It was not just knowledge, it was a way of life, a bond that ran deeper than blood. Yet, even as a child, Elenara had sensed the weight of her duty. The land had always spoken to her, and she had always listened. She had seen the way the trees bent when the wind changed, the way the rivers shifted their course with the seasons, the way the creatures of the forest moved in harmony with the land. She had understood, even then, that Virell was not just a place. It was a living entity, a force of nature that could not be tamed or controlled. It was not hers to command, but hers to protect. As she grew, the burden of her role became heavier. The people of Virell, though few in number, had always lived in harmony with the land, shaping their lives to the rhythms of the forest rather than the other way around. But the world beyond the trees was changing. The humans had come, bringing with them machines that roared like beasts, their lights cutting through the darkness like fire. They had built roads where there had been none before, carved through the land with tools that did not understand the language of the trees. They had spoken of progress, of the future, of knowledge. But to Elenara they had spoken of destruction. She had tried to understand them, to find a way to bridge the gap between the two worlds. She had watched from the shadows as the first explorers had arrived, their eyes wide with wonder and their hands eager to take. She had listened to their words, their promises, their claims that they would bring prosperity, that they would not harm the land. But she had also seen the way their machines had torn through the soil, the way the trees had recoiled from their presence, the way the rivers had turned dark with the remnants of their passage. And so she had chosen her path. She would not allow the land to be broken, not by the hands of men who did not understand its will. She would stand as its guardian, as its voice, as its protector, even if it meant standing alone, even if it meant facing the might of an entire world that did not see the forest as a living being, but as a resource to be taken. The weight of her decision settled heavily upon, but she had also seen the way their hands of men who did not understand its will. She would stand as its guardian, as its voice, as its card, with King. Her, but she did not waver. The land had chosen her, and she would not let it down. The arrival of the intruders. The first sign of the humans' arrival was not the roar of their machines, nor the gleam of their strange metal, but the hush that fell over the land. The trees, which had always spoken in the language of rustling leaves and whispering winds, now fell silent. The rivers, which had once sung with the rhythm of the land, now ran in uneasy currents, their waters darkened by an unseen presence. Even the creatures of the forest, from the smallest insects to the great beasts that roamed the undergrowth, had sensed the change. They moved away from the edges of the trees, their eyes watchful, their instincts warning them of something foreign, something that did not belong. And then the machines came. They were unlike anything the people of Virell had ever seen. Great towering constructs of metal and glass, their forms gleaming under the twin suns. They moved with a strange, unnatural grace, their wheels carving paths through the earth, their lights casting long, flickering shadows across the land. The humans who rode within them were not like the explorers who had come before, who had spoken with reverence and curiosity. These were not wanderers. They were builders, engineers, and seekers of knowledge, their eyes filled with the hunger of discovery. They called themselves the Expedition, a group of scientists and explorers who had come to Virell not to conquer, but to understand. Elenara watched from the depths of the forest, her heart heavy with the knowledge of what was to come. She had expected the humans to come, but she had not expected them to come with such certainty, such confidence. They did not see the land as a living being, as something to be respected and protected. To them, Virell was a mystery, a world waiting to be mapped, studied, and tamed. They spoke of progress, of the future, of the endless possibilities that lay before them. But to Elenara they spoke of destruction. She had tried to warn them, to show them that the land was not theirs to take, that it was not a resource to be exploited, but a force of nature that could not be controlled. She had tried to make them understand that the trees were not just wood, that the rivers were not just water, that the land itself had a will, a voice, a presence that could not be ignored. But the humans had not listened. They had only seen what they wished to see, and they had pressed forward. And so the battle had begun, not with weapons, but with will. The land would not be taken, the trees would not be cut, the rivers would not be dammed, and Elenara, the guardian of the forest, would not allow it. A clash of will, Elenara moved through the dense undergrowth, her steps silent on the earth, her presence barely disturbing the air. She had spent her life learning the language of the forest, listening to the whispers of the trees, feeling the pulse of the land beneath her feet. But now that language was being drowned out by the voices of the humans, their machines roaring like beasts, their footsteps pounding against the soil as they carved paths through the land. She could feel the forest recoiling, its will clashing with the will of those who had come to take. She had tried to speak to them, to show them that this was not a world to be conquered, but one that had to be understood. She had stood before them, her hands outstretched, her voice steady, and told them that the trees did not grow for the taking, that the rivers did not flow for the taking, that the land itself was not a thing to be bent to their will. But they had not listened. They had only seen what they wished to see, and they had pressed forward, their machines tearing through the undergrowth, their tools carving into the earth with a hunger that was not their own. She had tried to stop them, to stand in their way, to let the forest speak through her. She had called upon the wind, had let the trees bend and sway, had let the rivers rise in protest. But the humans had not understood. They had not heard the warnings in the rustling leaves or the murmuring waters. They had only seen the land as something to be mapped, something to be claimed. And so she had been forced to act. She moved deeper into the forest, where the trees stood tall and ancient, their roots entwined like the veins of the land itself. She placed her hands against the bark, feeling the pulse of the forest, the will of the trees. She called upon them, and they answered. The roots rose from the soil, curling around, had let the trees bend and sway, had let the trees bend and sway, had let the rivers rise entwined, the ping, the legs of the machines, slowing their advance. The trees bent inward, their branches entwining, forming barriers that the humans could not pass. The wind howled through the canopy, carrying the voices of the forest, warning the intruders that they were not welcome. But the humans were not so easily deterred. They had come with purpose, with knowledge, with the belief that they could shape the world to their will. They had brought machines that could cut through the trees, tools that could break the land, and they had brought with them the arrogance of those who had never known the weight of the earth beneath their feet. Elenara could feel the tension rising, the balance of the land shifting. The forest was resisting, but the humans were not backing down. She could see the fire in their eyes, the hunger in their hearts. They would not stop. And so she knew what she had to do. She had to make them understand, not through words, but through action. She had to show them that the land was not theirs to take, that it was not a thing to be conquered, but a force of nature that could not be ignored. And if they would not listen, then she would have to fight. Not with weapons, but with the will of the forest itself. The human perspective. For the humans, the arrival on Virell was not just an exploration, it was a mission of discovery, a chance to unravel the mysteries of an untouched world. The expedition had been assembled with the utmost care, each member selected for their expertise in biology, engineering, and environmental science. They had come not as conquerors, but as seekers of knowledge, driven by the belief that understanding the unknown was the key to progress. To them, Virell was not a land of resistance, but a world waiting to be studied, to be mapped, to be understood. At the head of the expedition was Kalen Dane, a man of quiet determination and unshakable conviction. He had spent his life studying the delicate balance of ecosystems, and he had always believed that humanity's role was not to dominate nature, but to coexist with it. He had led the team with the hope that they could find a way to integrate with the land, to learn from it, to take only what was necessary and leave the rest untouched. But as they ventured deeper into the forest, he could feel the weight of their task pressing upon him. The land was not as welcoming as they had hoped. The trees did not move as expected, the rivers did not flow in predictable patterns, and the creatures of the forest did not behave as they should. It was as if the planet itself was watching them, waiting to see if they would respect it or try to take from it. The other members of the expedition shared Kalen's initial curiosity, but as the days passed, the unease grew. They had encountered signs of resistance, trees that seemed to shift when they were not looking, rivers that changed course overnight, and the occasional shadow that moved where no creature should be. Some of the scientists were fascinated, believing that they were witnessing a form of intelligence in the land itself. Others, however, were growing impatient. They had come to Virell to study, not to wait for the forest to decide whether Ohor would be allowed to stay. Tensions began to rise within the group. Some of the engineers were eager to push forward, to build the necessary infrastructure to support their research. Others argued that they should take a more cautious approach, that they should observe, that they should learn before they acted. Kalen found himself caught between the two sides, torn between the ideals he had always held and the reality of the world before him. He had always believed that knowledge was the key to harmony. But now he was beginning to wonder if the land of Virell would ever allow them to find that harmony. And so the humans pressed on, their machines cutting through the undergrowth, their tools carving into the earth, their presence a challenge to the will of the land. They did not yet know that they were not just fighting against a forest. They were fighting against the will of a planet that had long been watching them, waiting for the moment when they would finally understand. The breaking point. The forest had long been a place of quiet resistance, but now the land was no longer content to watch from the shadows. The trees, once passive in their slow, deliberate growth, now bent inward, their branches entwining like the fingers of an ancient being. The ground beneath the humans' feet trembled, as if the very earth was shifting in protest. The rivers, which had once flowed in steady, predictable currents, now surged with unnatural force, their waters rising and falling in rhythmic pulses that sent waves crashing against the banks. The wind, once a gentle whisper through the leaves, now howled through the canopy, carrying the voices of the forest in a language that the humans could not understand. Elenara stood at the heart of it all, her hands pressed against the bark of an ancient tree, feeling the pulse of the land as it surged with fury. She could sense the forest's will, its determination to protect itself from those who would take from it. The humans had come with the arrogance of those who believed they could shape the world to their will, and now the land was showing them what they had not expected. The first true clash came when the humans attempted to establish a permanent base. They had set up their equipment, their metal structures, their machines, believing that they could carve a place for themselves in the land, but the forest would not allow it. The trees had begun to move, their roots rising from the soil, curling around the legs of the machines, slowing their progress. The ground beneath their feet had begun to shift, sending tremors through the land, making it difficult for them to stand. The wind had grown stronger, carrying with it the scent of something ancient, something powerful. Kalen Dane had watched in horror as the land turned against them. He had always believed that understanding was the key to coexistence, but now he saw that the land did not want to be understood. It wanted to be respected. He had tried to reason with Elenara, to show her that they were not here to destroy, but to learn. But she had not listened. She had only seen the machines, the tools, the arrogance of those who had come to take, and now the forest was showing them what they had not expected. The humans had tried to push forward, to force their way into the land, but the forest had not yielded. The trees had grown taller, their branches entwining to form barriers that the machines could not pass. The rivers had risen, their currents sweeping away the metal structures that the humans had built. The wind had howled through the trees, carrying with it the voices of the forest, warning the intruders that they were not welcome. And then the storm came. It had started as a whisper, a low rumble in the distance, but soon it had grown into a fury that swept across the land. The sky darkened, the clouds thickening with the weight of the storm. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the forest in flashes of white light. The rain came in sheets, drenching the land, washing away the machines that had tried to take from it. The wind roared through the trees, bending them, breaking them, reshaping the land itself. Elenara stood amidst it all, her body soaked with rain, her eyes fixed on the humans who had come to take. She could feel the forest's will, its determination to protect itself. She had not wanted this, but the land had made its choice. The humans had come with the arrogance of those who believed they could shape the world to their will, and now the land was showing them what they had not expected. The storm had begun, and there was no turning back. The choice of the guardian Elenara stood at the heart of the storm, her breath coming in ragged gasps as the wind howled around her. The forest was in turmoil, the land itself rising in defiance against the intruders who had come to take. The trees bent and swayed, their roots shifting with the will of the land, their branches entwining in a silent protest. The rivers surged, their waters rising with the force of the storm, and the sky above was a swirling mass of dark clouds, illuminated only by flashes of lightning. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing upon her, the enormity of the decision that lay before her. The humans had come with the arrogance of those who believed they could shape the world to their will, and now the land was showing them what they had not expected. But was this the way it had to be? Could the forest truly be protected only through destruction? Could the land be saved only by driving the humans away, by showing them that they were not welcome? She had spent her life learning the language of the forest, understanding its will, its needs. She had always believed that the land was not something to be conquered, but something to be respected. She had tried to make the humans understand that the trees were not just wood, that the rivers were not just water, that the land itself was a living being with a will of its own. But they had not listened. They had only seen what they wished to see, and they had pressed forward. Now, as the storm raged around her, she knew that she had to make a choice. She could let the forest take its course, let the land show the humans what they had not expected, let the trees rise and fall, let the rivers sweep away the machines that had come to take. But that would be a victory of destruction, not of understanding. It would not be a solution, only a temporary reprieve. The humans would return, stronger, more determined, and the cycle would begin again. Or she could find another way. She could try to reach them, to show them that the land was not theirs to take, that it was not theirs to take, that it was not a resource to be exploited, but a force of nature that could not be ignored. She could try to make them understand that the trees did not grow for the taking, that the rivers did not flow for the taking, that the land itself had a will, a voice, a presence that could not be ignored. But how? She had tried before, but they had not listened. They had only seen what they wished to see. But now, with the storm raging around her, with the forest itself in turmoil, she saw a chance. She could not stop the land from resisting, but she could guide it. She could show the humans that the forest was not an enemy, but a force of nature that could be understood, that could be respected. She could show them that the land was not theirs to take, but theirs to coexist with. And so, with a deep breath, she stepped forward, her hands outstretched toward the storm. She called upon the forest not to destroy but to speak. She called upon the trees, the rivers, the wind, and the earth, and she let them answer. The storm did not cease, but it did not grow stronger. The wind did not howl louder, but it did not fall silent. The trees did not fall, but they did not rise in defiance. The rivers did not sweep away the machines, but they did not wash them away. The land was listening, and so was Kalen Dane. The path to understanding. Kalen Dane stood at the edge of the storm, his heart pounding in his chest as the wind howled around him. The forest was not an enemy, but a force of nature that had been watching, waiting, and now it was speaking. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing upon him, the realization that they had come not to conquer, but to understand. He had spent his life believing that knowledge was the key to harmony, and now the land was showing him what he had not expected. Elenara had stepped forward, her hands outstretched toward the storm, and the land had answered. The trees had not fallen, the rivers had not surged in destruction, but the storm had not ceased. It was as if the forest was waiting for them to listen, to understand. He could feel the presence of the land around him, the pulse of the earth beneath his feet, the whisper of the wind through the leaves. It was not a force of destruction, but of will, of something ancient and powerful that had been, watching them, waiting for the moment when they would finally understand. He turned to the others, his voice steady despite the storm raging around them. "We have to listen," he said. "The land is not an enemy. It is not something to be taken. It is something to be understood." The others hesitated, their faces filled with uncertainty. Some of them still clung to the belief that they could shape the world to their will, that they could take from it and still leave it whole. But Kalen could see the change in them. He could see the realization dawning in their eyes, the understanding that they had come not to conquer, but to coexist. And then the land spoke again. The trees shifted, their branches parting just enough to allow the humans to pass. Rivers, which had once surged with unrelenting force, now calmed, their currents slowing, their waters reflecting the sky in a way that seemed almost reverent. The wind, which had howled through the canopy, now carried a different sound, a whisper that was not a warning, but a welcome. Elenara stepped forward, her gaze meeting Kalen's. "You have a choice," she said. "You can leave, and the land will not stop you. But if you stay, you must understand that you are not the masters of this world. You are not here to take. You are here to learn." Kalen looked around at his team, at the faces that had once been filled with determination, now filled with something else, something that was not fear, but respect. He had always believed that knowledge was the key to harmony, and now he saw that the land had been waiting for them to understand that. He turned back to Elenara, his voice steady. "We will stay," he said, "not to take, but to learn. We will not build our machines upon the land, nor will we carve through it. We will listen. We will understand." Elenara studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Then the land will accept you," she said. "But you must prove that you are not here to take." The forest was still for the first time since the storm had begun. The trees did not move, the rivers did not surge, and the wind did not howl. It was as if the land itself was waiting to see if they would honor the choice they had made. And then, slowly, the trees. She said, "But you must prove that you are not here to take," began to shift again, not in resistance, but in welcome. The branches parted further, allowing the humans to pass. The rivers calmed even more, their waters reflecting the sky with a quiet reverence. The wind, which had once been a force of nature, now carried the voices of the forest, not in warning, but in understanding. Kalen and his team stepped forward, their presence no longer a challenge, but a part of something greater. They had come to Virell not as conquerors, but as seekers of knowledge. And now the land was showing them that they were not alone. Elenara watched as the humans moved through the forest, their steps careful, their presence no longer a threat, but a part of something greater. She had spent her life protecting the land, and now she saw that the humans had finally understood. The balance of the world had shifted. The land was no longer resisting, but welcoming. The humans were no longer taking, but learning. And for the first time, the forest was not just a place of nature, but a place of coexistence. And in that moment, Elenara knew that the land had found its voice once more, and that the world had found its way. A new harmony. As the days passed, the forest of Virell transformed. The humans no longer moved with the arrogance of those who sought to take, but with the careful steps of those who had learned to listen. The machines that had once roared like beasts now stood in silence, their purpose no longer to carve through the land, but to observe, to record, to understand. The trees, once wary of the intruders, now bent in a way that was not resistance, but acceptance. The rivers, which had once surged with unrelenting force, now flowed with a quiet reverence, their currents reflecting the sky in a way that seemed almost reverent. Elenara watched from the shadows, her heart no longer heavy with the burden of isolation. She had spent her life as the guardian of the forest, the protector of the land, and now she saw that the land had found a way to speak to those who had once sought to take from it. The humans had not been destroyed, nor had they been driven away. They had been given a choice, and they had chosen to understand. She had not expected this. She had spent years trying to show them that the land was not theirs to take, that it was not a resource to be exploited, but a force of nature that could not be ignored. And now she saw that they had finally understood. Kalen Dane stood at the heart of the forest, his hands pressed against the bark of an ancient tree, feeling the pulse of the land beneath his fingertips. He had come to Virell believing that knowledge was the key to harmony, and now he saw that the land had been waiting for them to learn. He had spent his life searching for the balance between man and nature, and now he saw that it was not a balance of dominance, but of coexistence. The humans had not left, nor had they taken. They had found a way to be part of the land, to learn from it, to respect it. And in doing so, they had found something greater than knowledge. They had found understanding. Elenara stepped forward, her voice steady. "The land has accepted you," she said. "But you must remember that this is not the end. It is only the beginning. The forest will always be watching, always listening. And if you ever forget, if you ever seek to take instead of understand, the land will not be so forgiving." Kalen nodded, his gaze filled with something new. something that had not been there before: understanding, respect, a willingness to learn. And so the balance of the world had been restored, not through destruction, not through force, but through understanding. The land had found its voice once more, and the humans had found their place within it. And for the first time in a long time, the forest was not just a place of nature. It was a place of coexistence. Do not forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more stories. Hit the notification bell to be notified of new stories when they become available. Feel free to leave a comment and tell me if you enjoyed the story and want to hear more like it.